Aware of the Boneyard in Alaska?
I've heard of it, and it sounds fascinating. I don't think he's revealed much about that to the public yet.
It's an amazing discovery. This guy's a gold miner, and he has this large piece of land in Alaska. They're mining for gold, and they start finding like tusks and bones. And in one area that's only a few acres, they found thousands and thousands of woolly mammoth bones and tusks and saber-toothed tiger. Was it saber-toothed tiger? No. It was short-faced bear. They found all these all
the megafauna,
many animals that weren't even supposed to exist in Alaska. And he's like, look, we have the bones of it. And one of the things they found recently was bones that were sawed, clearly sawed.
Human workmanship.
But like a sophisticated tool. Let me see if you could pull it up so you could see how it looked.
Clearly cut.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, absolutely.
So they're trying to find out what the dates on these are.
That was my next question. Have they dated it?
They just got these recently. This is fairly recent. So I believe he's had some issues with universities not giving back his stuff and selling off his stuff.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. Well, he recently started a bone rush in the East River. Because it turns out that during the 1920s or 1930s, stuff that they had taken from his land before he owned it, they had dumped some of it because they had so much of it. They dumped it in the East River. And, they were balking at it. But meanwhile, these people have found it there.
Yeah.
So here it goes. I think many of you are intrigued by these Ice Age bones found in the Boneyard in Alaska. If you zoom in, you'll see that it's been sanded or somehow been worked down to a smooth finish on the end. I'm going to carbon date one of them. I'll post the results when I do. So this is 3 weeks ago, so it's probably going to take a little longer. But look how smooth it is on that one bottom.
It's perfectly cut, and we'll look forward to seeing the dating results. But the fact that we're dealing with megafauna that went extinct between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago implies very strongly that it's at least that old.
Not only that, his area has a very thick layer of carbon that seems to indicate some sort of a mass burn or some sort of a horrible disaster. So they're going through these layers of things, and they're finding an unbelievable amount of animals that died in this area. Just a mass die-out.
Yes, and what would cause a mass die-out? Not human hunting.
Right.
This is I'm strongly opposed to what they call the overkill hypothesis. This is one of the alternative explanations for why the megafauna went extinct at that time.
Right.
Is that hunter-gatherers literally wiped out all the megafauna, and to me that, for a couple of reasons, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, first of all, because hunter-gatherers we know in the world today do not wipe out their prey animals. They live in coexistence with them. They live in balance with them. They don't just destroy them all. It's our kind of culture that destroys animals completely.
Like what we did with the bison.
What we did with the bison.
Yeah.
And therefore it seems very un-hunter-gatherer-like activity to completely destroy the megafauna. And the other thing is the simultaneous extinction of large numbers of creatures that is happening very, very, very quickly suggests to me that we're looking at a disaster of some sort. And that's why the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, which is solid science, although undoubtedly disputed, which suggests that multiple fragments of a disintegrating comet hit the Earth 12,800 years ago. Many of them didn't hit the Earth. Many of them exploded in the sky. They were not that big, maybe 100 meters in diameter. So they were airbursts, but they leave these characteristic signatures in the ground. And
like Tunguska.
Exactly like Tunguska. The Tunguska event is a recent example of that. 30th of June, 1908, happens to be at the peak of the Beta Taurids, and the Taurid meteor stream is identified as the likely culprit for what happened in the Younger Dryas. Wildfires burning, you get these impacts smashing into the Earth, bursting in the air over forests. They cause huge fires, and that's why you get enormous amounts of charcoal as a result. And then the larger objects, it's thought, hit the North American ice cap and caused a very large amount of meltwater to flow into the world ocean, and that's what brought temperatures down at the beginning of the Younger Dryas. We can argue there are alternative theories. Maybe solar activity was involved. Robert Schoch prefers a change in solar activity, and kudos to Robert. He's a brilliant scientist, and he's put his neck on the line by advocating a much older sphinx. Any scientist these days in the field of archaeology who sticks his neck out and says that the archaeological narrative is wrong immediately gets massively attacked. And I think that's most unfortunate. A couple of points I'd like to make about this. First of all, we said at the beginning, most archaeology, certainly in the industrialized countries, is a result of a dam or a road being built and archaeologists being called in to see if there's anything there. It's not a targeted search. It's kind of random. Something's happening and archaeologists go in there. And then there's huge areas of the world that have had very little archaeology done in them. Those include the Amazon rainforest, where I've just been. I've been 3 weeks in the Brazilian Amazon and another couple of weeks in Peru. And there are extraordinary revelations coming out of the Amazon rainforest. Now, the Amazon rainforest, up until very recently, had very little archaeology done. You're talking about 6 million square kilometers of the Earth's surface, which has hardly been touched by archaeology. And now it is being touched by archaeology, thanks to LIDAR, which is identifying enormous structures under the canopy. We're finding that we have to rewrite the whole story of the Amazon, that there were potentially populations of millions living in the Amazon, that there were cities, they were joined by roads hundreds of kilometers in length. All of these things are recent discoveries which says we should be thinking again about the Amazon. Same goes for the submerged continental shelves, 27 million square kilometers of the best real estate on Earth that were above water during the Ice Age are underwater now. Yes, there's been some marine archaeology, but not enough to rule out the possibility of a lost civilization. And the same with the Sahara Desert, 9 million square kilometers. A little bit of archaeology done, but before archaeologists say there was no lost civilization, this is what the Society for American Archaeology said in their open letter to Netflix, complaining about my show. They said, we know that there was no lost civilization during the Ice Age. And my question to them is, how can they possibly know that when they've looked at relatively small areas of the Earth? The picture is not complete. They should be saying, we don't think there was a lost civilization during the Ice Age, fine. But to say we know there wasn't, that's completely wrong.
Well, it's silly, and it's also, it becomes more and more of a problem the more things get discovered. And the more they push back harder and more emotionally and more religiously.
Yeah.
It's really kind of crazy the way they behave, that is as if they have like an accurate map.
Yeah.
Like the way they viewed some of the older hieroglyphs that depict civilizations that were 30,000 years ago, like kings and the lineage.
The king lists from ancient Egypt go back 30 plus thousand years.
But they want to pretend that those are myth.
Yeah, and yet, for their chronology of ancient Egypt, they actually use the king lists. The moment those king lists start giving dates that fall within dates that archaeologists like, everything before those dates, they say, oh, they just made it up.
How crazy is that? Wouldn't it be a fascinating alternative if you were an archaeologist to go, you know what? Maybe this king's list is legit. Maybe this thing really is 30, 40,000 years old.